Gundam GQuuuuuuX is finally airing, and that means I can finally start making videos about this really unique entry in the Gundam franchise. From what I noticed ever since that first trailer dropped, a lot of the hype surrounding this series mainly formed outside of Japan due to Hideaki Anno's studio's involvement in this new series. And while I certainly can't make a massive video about how much I've been enjoying this series since it's still airing, I'd settle for the next best thing by talking about one of the coolest things about this series that a lot of veteran fans, or just diehard fans of the original series, really enjoyed, which was the alternate reality of the 1 Year War. Originally, when this stuff premiered in the GQuuuuuuX beginning film that started chronologically instead of how the TV series has been airing, I saw a fair amount of people talk a lot about what happened in the 1 Year War section a lot more than what happens in the actual series. It kind of made me sad how much it got overshadowed considering how much I enjoyed the new characters, the music, the art direction. I just had a great time throughout the entire theatrical preview. But I can understand why so many people were excited though. Challia Bull has an even more vital role now more than ever, a lot of fan favorite side characters make appearances, and a lot of interesting events unfold due to one vital change in the original Gundam series' first episode's events. So today, I'm gonna glaze the ever-living hell out of this really nostalgic and surprising alternate retelling of the 1 Year War. So if this is your first time here, I'm Cheems, and if you want to see more videos from me like this, then subscribing and liking the video would help out a ton. So, without further ado...
私の運が良かったのかな。いや、あの時のひらめきが全てを変えた気がする。
This prologue, backstory, flashback, whatever you want to call it, was led by Hideaki Anno. He was responsible for writing the script for this, as well as planning how the events would unfold. If you're somehow not in the know of who he is, he's one of the most appreciated and respected anime directors to this day. Responsible for directing works like Neon Genesis Evangelion, Aim for the Top Gunbuster, Shin Godzilla, Shin Ultraman, Shin Kamen Rider, as well as being the chief director for the 4 Evangelion rebuild films. I was originally going to make a video the day the GQuuuuuuX beginning film released in Japanese theaters this January about how this new series had a lot of people believing that Anno has a massive reach on this new series. It was all done and ready to go, but a lot of shit happening in my personal life killed my motivation to do anything for a good while. But contrary to popular belief, Hideaki Anno is not the director of this series and instead has smaller but still very important roles in the production of this series. He has taken on the role of a storyboard artist, something he has done since his early days in Gainax almost 40 years ago. He has also taken on the role of a writer, but not lead writer of the entire series, which is important. Anno has been pointed out to have been kept on a leash so that he doesn't get too crazy by meddling into things, according to Ikuto Yamashita, who was responsible for designing the main mobile suits. In that scrap video of mine, I also pointed out how you should instead look into the main person who is leading the series creatively, Kazuya Tsurumaki. If you don't know who he is, he made his directorial debut with the iconic Fooly Cooly OVA. He directed the 4 Evangelion rebuild films, working directly under Hideaki Anno, and also directed the sequel to Gunbuster, Die Buster. But thanks to him finally getting the chance to prove himself with Fooly Cooly, he has built a reputation great enough to, decades later, lead the first ever Gundam anime series to be handled outside of Sunrise. Though not completely, since this is a joint collaboration of 2 studios. This 1 Year War portion, despite having Anno's DNA all over it, was not conceived of or planned by Hideaki Anno himself, and it was always meant to be there. So it's important to know that first and foremost. This isn't a jab at Anno, by the way. I'm only saying this because people usually have this habit of seeing Anno's name on things and almost immediately assuming he's in charge. There's a few interviews that came from some of the pamphlets handed out at the Japanese showings of the GQuuuuuuX premiere that were translated by Zionic, and I highly recommend checking them out. There's a lot of interesting things from director Tsurumaki, Anno, Yamashita, and a bunch of other staff involved with this series, so if you want to check those out, I'll leave them over in the description. Moving on to what this 1 Year War alternate what-if scenario is, the entire thing was born from a single premise. What if Char Aznavour had stolen the Gundam? How would it have changed the course of history? I can tell how much love was poured into this. From the use of the older sound effects from that era, the original soundtrack, and the iconic opening exposition, I can tell that the staff involved really wanted to express how much the first Gundam series meant to them. The first thing I really want to mention in this is how the storyboard of the beginning portion, with Char and Denim boarding the colony to the eventual piloting of the Gundam and takedown of the gun cannon, stay very tight and faithful to Yoshiyuki Tomino's board from 1979. I'm going to have clips up so you can make the connection if you aren't familiar with the material, but it not only feels extremely out of love, but it really goes to show how timeless that first episode is to me and them. Watching all of that unfold in theaters was insane, man. I mean, when I saw the original trilogy in theaters last year, I had the time of my life seeing what pretty much was the first episode on the big screen. But this time around, I had no idea this film was starting off this way. I was shaking so damn much out of pure excitement alone. This whole prologue was boarded by Hideaki Anno and Mahiro Maeda, and were corrected and finalized by Kazuya Tsurumaki. And beside the clear homages to the original, I noticed a lot of their usual quirks and tidbits that are usually seen all over their other works they've boarded, which made for a very fast-paced episode that always kept me on my toes. The whole script and board demands a very fast pace too, as the entire prologue skims through the entire events of the war very quickly. But it did keep me very engaged because of the insane shit that happened in here. But speaking of the script, Anno remarked in one of the interviews contained in the pamphlets handed out for the film's theatrical release that while he was thinking up the lines for the script, he felt as if he was being possessed by Tomino himself. That or he's a huge nerd, pick your poison. Anno influence aside, so many interesting things happened in this alternate retelling. So I guess the only way to discuss how I feel and what decisions this alternate retellings take really entails into the grander story. Alright, so Operation V. Instead of Jean and Denim going inside the colony, Char ends up replacing Jean. The whole reason why the mission ended up in Char's failure is mainly due to Jean's impulsive nature to seek out glory like Char would. He opens fire on the Federation mobile suits out of nowhere, and even civilians. This naturally forced Admiral Ray to enter the Gundam and take matters into his own hands. And without even piloting a mobile suit prior, he takes out both Zaku's with relative ease. In this alternate retelling, Char pretty much does what Jean does, even saying that he's the type of person who would seek glory. But how he manages to pull it off compared to how Jean did really goes to show how cunning and strategic Char is. Instead of just opening fire on the mobile suits and drawing attention of everyone inside the colony, Char requests cover so that he can take the Gundam for himself. And he doesn't have to accidentally cause a hole in the colony to realize how to fight. Another cool thing to note is a scrapped part of the board where, like the original series, Char ends up slicing the gun cannon in half. They obviously needed to scrap this part because by doing so, it would have resulted in a hole forming inside the colony. Not only that, he ends up wiping out what would be the origins of the White Base crew. Captain Paulo, as well as everyone else, and I guess Bright Noah, ended up getting wiped out. This is the turning point of the war, no matter how you put it. Whoever has control of the Gundam at that point set in motion a chain reaction that would determine how the war would end. And Char obtaining the Gundam so early and getting rid of a Federation's ace in the hole is such a fatal blow in the conflict. And what comes after this is literally batshit insane, by the way. I can't tell you how many times I thought to myself in that theater, holy shit, they did that? So once the Pegasus ship, as well as the Gundam are delivered to the Zabi family, they end up modifying it and using it for their own gain. Sadly, this means that they canceled plans for a new mobile armor that has fresh Saikamu technology. And speaking of Zeon, Garma. Because Char doesn't end up playing a continuous game of cat and mouse with the White Base from Side 7 all the way to Jaburo, he doesn't ever go to Earth where he reunites with Garma, who was operating there. This means Garma doesn't get double-crossed, and he actually comes out of this conflict alive, though he supposedly resigned due to a personal matter. I'm guessing he just resigned and ran away with Isolina since tensions between the Federation and Zeon increased significantly because of Operation V actually succeeding and posing a lot of good for Zeon and a lot of more pressure for the Federation. I don't want this video to be just me restating events and saying, oh wow, that was cool. So that's kind of why the next few minutes of this retelling are going to be ones that I have only a few things to say. A lot of characters like Cecilia, Toquan and his team, Mikuve, Dr. Flanagan, and Challia Bull all make appearances, some of which reveal things that we already knew or present different spins on events that we are already familiar with. For instance, it's revealed that Challia knew that Char was always Castville Daikun, aka the son of Zeon Daikun. I always assumed she found out after Garma's death, since there was a lot of controversy surrounding his death in that Char could have been a suspect in it. Another big thing that she revealed is that she thought it was strange to have sent Lala Soon, a new type prodigy, over to the Flanagan Institute. That was the last thing she'd ever expect someone like him to do. So it would naturally mean that because of Lala, because they met, Char started to believe in new types. Here, none of that happened, and yet she still knew and let him by. The reason why, I'm assuming, is because victory seemed even more certain compared to how it went down in the original. Challia and Giran specifically are the two evil members of the Zabi family, and it was really interesting seeing their dispute over control lead to the entire family's demise. But here, we see less of the family's internal squabble, so I have no idea if both are really dead or not. I'm not even accounting for their father Daegwon here either. And since the war ends and the world is later defined with the different results of this one-year war, I got more curious thinking about what happened to them. And if they survived, was the world that our new cast live in the world they always envisioned, or was it always a fad? And speaking of Dr. Flanagan, his very short scene involving new types was pretty interesting to me. In the original series, and now here, he is the head of the Flanagan New Type Research Institute. And like I mentioned before, Lala was sent here. But Lala is nowhere to be seen or mentioned here at all. So therefore, Flanagan has a very brief conversation with Char about new types. The whole concept is introduced to Char, but a very similar line that Flanagan says is almost, if not one-to-one, with Char's conversation with Challia. In the compilation films, he says that if there is to be a reformation for man into an era of new types, I want to see it with my own eyes. This, again, is after he met Lala, an experience what new types are fully capable of. Yet Dr. Flanagan is the one who tells Char this. This scene feels like an intentional mirror of sorts to that very scene of Char and Challia, where both Char from the original and Flanagan here are both infatuated and interested with new types and are in full belief that an era of new types could be imminent, and are willing to see it unfold given the circumstances. So what if, somehow after the events of the one-year war, this new type era comes to pass? There's not much else I'd like to say for this portion, but I'm sure you have all been waiting for me to talk about a very special person.
Challia Bull 隊、ただいま到着いたしました。
Challia Bull has taken the fandom over by storm with his absolutely amazing new design in that goddamn wine scene. His introduction to this retelling happens as he returns from the Jupiter fleet to meet with Char. His inclusion to the story obviously has a lot of importance going forward, as he is one of the key players in the actual series. And funnily enough, this scene that I was talking about, the scene where Char and Challia Bull share wine in a romantically lit room, was a scene that Hideaki Anno absolutely felt like he needed to do. I mean, the man says it himself. And I'm not gonna lie, it's one of the best scenes from this retelling. When he's introduced, we are told that he kept serving between both Giran's faction and Challia's. I don't have to tell you what he probably felt swapping between both of these pieces of human filth. One doesn't believe in or have faith in what new types are, and the other probably had a little bit more leniency but is still pretty toxic. Both factions too are most likely at each other's throats most of the time as well. He probably had to endure and go through a ton. And in this scene, we get a little bit of a hint of Char's goal of getting revenge on the Zabis, but we finally hear Char's proposal to Challia to create a world where new types could live freely. For Challia, a man who was most likely discriminated against and treated horribly for the abilities he had, to hear this from Char must have put so much faith in the guy. From that point on, a rock-solid admiration, and I'm being 100% serious here, a love for this man must have formed here. Moving forward, the stage has been effectively set for the end of the one-year war. I forgot to mention this, but in this retelling, Zeon has been kinda whooping some ass. They still fall back in Jaburo, which allows a mass-produced gun cannon to emerge, and Solomon falls. But what really surprised me and made me freak the fuck out was that before Solomon fell to the Federation, we got word that the Big Zam would get mass-produced from Dozel's request. Now that the final battle for Luna 2 was set into motion and is led by Mikuve himself, it is revealed that the Federation officer Wakin, this dickhead, plans to drop Solomon onto Granada. I genuinely didn't expect that. It's such an insane reveal that gets slightly overshadowed by the fact that the Big Zam actually got mass produced and they are a goddamn overwhelming sight. with the plan being Toquan's team and Char sneaking onto Solomon to blow it up from the inside in order to keep it from hitting Granada. The final battle is set. And it's really fucking cool to not only see Char and Challia team up, but I immediately noticed that it was ported to pay specific homage to the 5th episode of Gunbuster when Kazumi and Noriko escort the Excellion in order to blow it up. I hate to sound like I might be on Zeon's side here, but goddamn, this was so exciting to see unfold. Not only that, it somewhat felt cathartic. It felt like a true victory was certain, that this operation would be a mere cakewalk. But then, everything changed in mere moments. If you missed a disclaimer at the beginning of this video was written by me the day after I saw the film in its IMAX premiere. And to my surprise, a lot of the Solomon stuff was cut for the TV broadcast. In this next section, I make a lot of theory stuff here, not knowing that it would get cut. So if this is something you want to stay blind to, then I'd suggest skipping to the timestamp below. I don't know if anything that was cut will show up in the TV series at all, so in case there's a chance I could accidentally spoil you, I encourage you to skip to the end of this part. This part really surprised me. Not only was it out of nowhere, but it sparked a chain reaction that sets up what happened in the main series. The Sparkles realm, as it's called later on, while having a really new and even more beautiful look to it, has obviously appeared before in the original series and also films. In a battle that once started as a one-on-one fight between Lala Soon and Amuro Ray, but later turned into a battle between Lala, Amuro, Char, and eventually his sister Artesia, or Sayla Mass, Lala and Amuro, while in the midst of battle, sparked this telepathic communication with each other. In this, we see both Lala and Amuro begin to not only understand each other more through reflecting on what they are fighting for, in Lala's case Char and Amuro's no one, but we also see them realize that them meeting in battle like the way that they just did is a cruel fate. But if Lala doesn't kill Amuro, the man she loves will be killed. It's a tragic set of circumstances that leads to an even more horrific one, where Lala dies trying to save Char. But here's the part that kind of made me start to wonder more and more about the alternate retelling of the Sparkle stuff. When Lala and Amuro communicate one last time, she leaves telling Amuro that more people will become new types, ending things off by saying, "Oh Amuro, I can see time." And guess what Char says? Yeah, so given that what comes later in the series, I feel like Char has definitely become one with the Gundam, kind of like how Rita's soul merged into the psycho frame of the Phoenix in Gundam narrative. Though it's different because Char's Gundam is said to only speak to its pilot and he doesn't actually control it. So here's what I got curious about when it comes to the Sparkle stuff. That realm is defined by two people connecting on a grander scale, to a level in which it seems otherworldly. This makes me wonder, we didn't see much of when Char was in this realm, so he must have been communicating with somebody. The Toquan squad had long since left, but he wasn't alone. So my theory is that he was communicating with the one person he ended up encountering, his sister Artesia. I don't really know who else he could be talking to. In the original series events, he is said to have saved Lala at some unknown time. I don't know, or I guess remember if it was before Char began the Operation V mission, but I'm assuming they are not using the Origins established meeting of Lala and Char before even the colony drop happened. So I'm ruling out Lala. Now I'm also ruling out Challia since we would have known if it was him, and he wasn't in exact proximity with Char when this all happened. The original series, and even later on in GQuuuuuuX, shows that there has to be some sort of close distance between both pilots in order for them to communicate. So I think Sayla might be the only answer we've got. She becomes a new type after joining the White base, and as she continues to fight, her mental and piloting strength increases. I'm assuming since she's the Federation's ace, she has risen to the piloting abilities that Amuro had in the near end of the One-Year War. So here's where I'm completely lost. What did they talk about, if they even did? Every time they communicated in the original series, the conversation usually stems down to, "Artesia, please quit the feds."
No.
From Jabro, the Texas colony, and even in Abo Aku, He keeps telling her to leave the Federation behind, not only because he would eventually come into conflict with her again and again, but he feels like the war isn't for Sayla. He believes this so much that he even tried to bribe her with a briefcase full of gold to leave the war behind. So in this version, they've never had the time to properly talk things out, kind of like Lala and Amuro. The whole conversation between the two was about how the fact that they are being forced to fight each other after meeting was a cruel if not grim fate. Maybe this is what happened with Char. In this version, I'm assuming they haven't talked since he left Artesia, kind of like how he did in the Origin, which was portrayed in the original movies. So them being reunited, but in the midst of combat, I'd say is pretty cruel for Char at least. So cruel in fact, that it causes Char and his Gundam to completely vanish. And an event kind of like the Axis Shock and Char's counterattack happens, dubbed the Zek Nova. So what does this mean for the grander story with our new cast of characters who live in this world where Zeon actually had independence?
ジオンが戦争に勝ったってスペースノイドは自由になれない。いつまで経っても苦しいままだ。
First off, I didn't expect the watch order to differ from the film version, meaning the one-year war stuff happened after the first episode with the new cast. But honestly, looking back at it, I'm still pretty mixed. I think it was a good move to start the broadcast with the new cast of characters and then save the lore dump for the second episode, but I know a lot of people who became alienated because of this decision. I think the best move was to drop a prologue episode a couple weeks before the series begins, kind of like the Wish from Mercury, but it has a risk of overshadowing what comes later. I have no doubt that Tsurumaki as well as the creatives involved realized that problem too, but I don't think the decision they made in the end was horrible. It does give you more time to think about the world that our cast lives in and what happened that caused it to be like that. Despite my surprise but mostly leveled expectations that despite the biggest war of the entire world at that point in time being won by the side that promised that a better world would emerge after successfully obtaining their independence, not much actually changed besides Space Noise becoming more and more oppressed than ever before. Not only that, but once again, just like the original series from over 45 years ago, points out how pointless the one-year war was. I mean, for context, after Zeon signed an armistice, the feds got even more corrupt and some Zeon remnants as well as key Federation players in the one-year war got together to fight the corrupt Federation. And we even got a bigger and badder Zeon. Not much got better and instead a lot worse. So with GQuuuuuuX's take here being kind of like this, but with an even more bitter aftertaste of what happened in the final hours of that war, made for an interesting reality that the main cast has to live in. I'm not going to say much about the new characters because I'd like to wait until the series finishes first, but I genuinely like how a lot of the cast discovers or even regrets how this outcome made their lives somehow worse. Oppression is rampant and there are a lot of people like Machu who might never even know what's on Earth because of the people who originally fought for said Space Noise's freedom and independence. And I hope the series keeps going into more detail about that. So with that said, here's my very short theory of how Challia will come into play with our new main cast. I think that with Challia Bull now alone without his partner, will end up coming into conflict or even in a direct confrontation with the younger era of pilots. I never really got a malicious intent from Challia ever, so I feel like he genuinely might be able to work alongside the young pilots in this series. And thanks to the fostering of the older generation, some sort of new type era will emerge. I feel like that's possible. If it doesn't happen, then I guess I'll go fuck myself then and never make a theory video ever again. I know this video was a lot of me glazing and also theorizing, but I'm completely aware that there are a good amount of people out there who either loved or hated this retelling, as they wanted a whole new and original series that didn't rely on anything from the Universal Century or even just more one-year war shenanigans, which not only left them alienated from the series as a whole, but also disappointed at what it turned out to be in their eyes. My only hope really is that the entire mystery of what happened to Char at Solomon and what happens with the historical figures and characters from the original series doesn't completely overshadow the new characters and what potentially interesting and new stories this series has for us. While I do love it when my nostalgia bone is tickled in Gundam and even outside series, I do think it's important for a series like this to stand on its own feet and tell a new and unique story without placing a huge reliance on what came before it. I personally am really excited for what this series has to offer. I haven't been this excited for a Gundam series really ever, and having watched the theatrical premiere of this series previously, I'm extremely excited to see what Tsurumaki, as well as the wonderful people involved in this series production, has to show us. Let me know what you think. Are you excited? What theories do you have? Talk about it in the comments below. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.